All right, IED. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to start activity 2.2.1, which is what is reverse engineering. And reverse engineering is a fascinating concept that involves taking a product or a device and essentially learning what makes it tick. And we're going to be looking through the different ways to take an object and dissect it and break it to pieces. Before we do that, though, we're going to need to go over a couple of things dealing with the act of taking things apart and seeing what makes them tick. Because if it is a part that is being sold, then usually some people have some rights to the things inside. Either they're copyrighted or there are claims and trademarks on them. So you have to be a little bit careful about if you're trying to make this thing your own, that you don't violate a whole bunch of trademark rules. And there are ethics involved with reverse engineering. So we're going to spend a little bit of time because I know I have a lot of students who don't really know what ethics are in principle. Like they've heard the word before, but if I were to ask somebody and be like, "Hey, what's ethics?" They would just be like, I'm not really sure." So, ethics are these types of values, and these values affect how a person thinks and behaves. So, there are several different professions when you get a job that those professions will have codes of ethics that go along with them. And they are a baseline set of standards that say you're going to behave this way. And if you don't, you're not really going to be. You stand the chance of having your certification taken away or your license taken away. So there's a lot of situations to where you have to abide by these codes of ethics, these principles of behavior. Because if you don't, like for example, if you're a teacher, then you're not just going to randomly dispense out zeros to people, or you're not going to go around and socially do things that are, um, you know, questionable to society, because if such things were to come to light and they learn that people do that kind of stuff, then you could actually get your license taken away for those kinds of things, among other things in general. So what we're going to be talking about is what happens when these values kind of come into clash with each other. So if you have two different ethical standards and you face them off against each other and they're different, then you have what's called an ethical dilemma. And I think ethical dilemmas are natural. They occur in all the time because you've got a lot of different people around, and all of those different people are going to have different ethical backgrounds. They're going to have different moral values on how a person thinks and behaves. And a couple of those are kind of listed over here on the right side of the sheet, like, designer babies. Should we edit our children's genomes just because we can? Should you have the right to be able to do that? And some people would say, yeah, sure, why not? You could eliminate a lot of diseases and a lot of other different things. And other people say, no, you really, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. So that's an ethical dilemma, and people are going to have different opinions on that. People are going to have different values, and they're going to behave based on those values. So these are some examples of ethics, and in a career like engineering or in like teaching, you abide by a set of ethics. So if you're an engineer specifically, since this is an engineering class, you're not going to make things and design things that are intentionally or that could actually hurt people if they used it the wrong way, or if it wore down. Like for example, if you built a bridge and you knew that that bridge in 15 years or less was going to collapse, you would not build that bridge. And if you did, then there's a certain ethical standard that you are violating because your priority is to the safety of the people that are benefiting from your creations. And that's another example of how in careers, ethics are super important because people are assuming that they're safe. When cars cross bridges, they assume that they're safe. When you walk across the sidewalk, you're assuming that a big sinkhole is not going to open up. Like people assume naturally that they're safe. And if you don't have that standard whenever you're making something in engineering, then you're violating their trust, for lack of a better word. Um, All right, so it says in here, like based on your life experience, you've already built a sense of what you believe is right and wrong, fair and unjust. You've developed personal habits relating to telling the truth and keeping your promises. In other words, you've developed an internal conscience that guides you in your making of decisions. Having personal integrity means that you act in a way that is consistent with your internal conscience, even if it's not the best decision for you personally. So, personal integrity means that you may, quote unquote, do the right thing. Like if you find a $20 bill on the ground, personal integrity would be like, hey, I need to go find out who this money belongs to, instead of saying, hey, I could just pocket this and then I would have $20. Personally, that would benefit you to keep the $20, but with your integrity, you would do what is consistent with your conscience. So, even if it wasn't, didn't completely and totally benefit you. So, in terms of engineering, there are lots of different times where you have to make things as safe as possible, and you could have made it a lot cheaper the other way. So, um, you have to take a couple of sacrifices in the realm of engineering. Okay. Let's see here. Integrity includes being truthful, reliable, responsible, and empathetic. You should show integrity in all aspects of your life, at school, at home, on teams, and at work. I totally agree with that statement. I think that's a really good one to make. Even as a professional, you need to be able to do those. There are a lot of ethical perspectives, and these ethical perspectives are basically how you view the world, like the way you perceive and approach an ethical dilemma. So these ethical perspectives are going to be kind of like how you solve the problem. And one of those is justice, is that you want to try to be able to treat each other equally and fairly. Another way to think about this is through like the virtue approach, which is to, in general, you want to try to be a good person, or if you're a company, you want to be a good company. And I'm sure you can think of a couple of examples you've heard in real life where there are like good companies that are nice to people, and then there are like bad companies that are not nice to people, and they're not compassionate, and they're not honest. And I'm not going to name out any names, but you could probably think of a couple off the top of your head. And if you don't know of any, and you're like, I don't really know of any companies that could be these things, just listen around you, because as people work, they'll tell you these things, and they'll tell you whether or not that company actually has their best interest in heart, or if it doesn't. Okay. Another way to think about this is to think about it from an outcome perspective, and that's to find solutions so that the good consequences outweigh the bad consequences. Sometimes in really complicated situations, like the designer baby thing, you have to weigh the outcomes. You can't just like do this by justice or virtue. It's a little bit more difficult, because are you really being honest and compassionate to a person if you could have removed the possibility of a significant illness for that child? I don't know. That's a really tough one. So in that case, it comes out to like weighing the outcomes. And the last one is the ability to care, and that's taking responsibility to reduce pain and suffering and to protect the vulnerable. Um, all of these are different ways to try to come up to a solution to your ethical crisis or your ethical dilemma that you have. And whenever you have an ethical discussion with somebody, it's really important to note that this is not a debate. So if you're trying to talk with somebody about these ethical considerations, it's not a competition. There's not really a winner or a loser. You need to make sure that everybody can speak evenly between each other. And whenever everybody speaks, the other people are going to listen and respect the different viewpoints of the other people. Otherwise, you're just entrenched in your own ethical background. You're not really listening. You're not really trying to solve a problem. You're just trying to fixate yourself on one way or the other way. So, also important, these are just general good communication skills at this point. Don't interrupt others. Resolve conflicts in a manner that respects all the participants. Obviously, yelling is not the best idea. And then feedback will address ideas and not the person presenting the ideas. So you're going to be focusing on the ideas and not on the person. Okay, so ideas are hard, people soft. So just because you don't agree with them doesn't mean that you have to like bash them all the time. And then the last thing is there's a flow chart here that kind of describes how you would actually go through how to solve an ethical dilemma. And I think the most important thing, because you can read this, the most important thing is that whenever you get down to the bottom and you select the best option, the next thing is to modify your ethical views when necessary. So times change and situations change. So whenever the situation changes, you need to go back and you need to go through this process again. And a lot of times, companies or large organizations won't go through this shift very quickly, and it ends up costing them in the long run. So you have to be able to monitor the situation and see if there was a change, if that change is actually going to need to amount to changing the ethical behavior of the company or the people around them or the group or all of the above. But anyway, this is what ethics are. Ethics are just moral compasses on how to think on things, and it can drive behavior. And as a professional, it drives the behavior of you as a professional. And since a lot of y'all are studying to be engineers, you will have ethics that you're going to have to follow. So I figured it was important to go over, and I'll talk to you guys later.